The best Cowboys insider on the beat is now joining us on the Diamond Factory hotline. He is Todd Archer to recap the Cowboys draft weekend on the home of America's team with Shan, Bobby, and Jane Slater on 105.3 The Fan. Good morning, Todd. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing? And now that I know that Choppy's gone, he's the reason why I've never been on the show with y'all before, right?
That's what I told Shan. I said I had to make sure it was a week when Choppy was on vacation so that Todd would actually agree to come on.
Todd, why?
This should be Choppy's favorite week of the year because it's the home run derby up at Dr. Pepper Ballpark on Wednesday. Is he going to be there to defend his title?
Nope. He's all the way in Mexico for the whole week.
Just giving it up.
Todd, if I told you that Choppy would be a morning show host, for some reason it never happened at the other radio station, 103.3, you would have said what? Why wasn't Choppy full-time on air over there, and how dumb are we for having him on for a decade?
Well, you guys are still in existence, so I don't know how dumb that was.
How would you recap this past draft weekend? You know, the sentiment seems to be, it's solid, not a sexy draft. Fans are never going to be happy with the picks. How would you summarize what the Cowboys did over these last few days?
You used two of the words that came to my mind, and I'll go with effective, because they effectively answered some of their holes on their roster with Mozzie Smith. Obviously, a lot of people have been crying for them to get a defensive tackle that can plug up the middle for years. I'm still of the belief, if he doesn't give pass rush, I don't really know. But what Will McClay's done, what his scouting staff has done, they kind of get a benefit of the doubt. And, they found a tight end. They got a linebacker that they needed. And then once you get to day three, it's like, okay, find some traits and figure out who's the best fit for guys. And, they liked Eric Scott a lot more than a lot of people. They had the kid do a YouTube video for them to send them video of him back in Kansas to make sure his leg was okay. Obviously, we know the Deuce Vaughn story. And then Jalen Brooks talking to people. While he didn't play as much as this guy did at Ohio State, he sounds like Noah Brown in all the things that he can do on special teams. So, it seems like it was an effective draft that I know Dan Quinn, I forgot one guy in Fehoko. Dan Quinn is a huge believer in Fehoko and what he can be defensively for him, if not this year, certainly down the road.
Todd Archer, ESPN insider for the Cowboys, joining us here on The Fan. Quick question for you. You and I both were led to believe that tight end was the position they were likely to address in the first round. Do you think we were misled, Todd, or do you think that they didn't expect Mozzie to be there and ultimately decided that, when you're 22nd against a run, you've got to address that because that was killing them last year and it will likely kill them again this year if they didn't address it?
Yeah, I hope we weren't misled, and I don't think we were. I think tight end was nearer at the top of their list, and the way I understand it is that Laporta was their top-rated tight end, followed by Kincaid and then Mayer. So I don't think this was Buffalo jumping up above the Cowboys the way Philly did a few years ago and got Goddard. So I don't think we were misled, but I think they looked at it as, where's the strength in the draft? What do we need? And they felt they could get tight ends in rounds 2, 3, 4, and they wouldn't be able to get a defensive tackle of similar quality at rounds 2, 3, and 4. And that's why they went with Smith over, I'll believe it was going to be Laporta, because I know there are two high-level people in that building that really believed he was the best tight end in the draft.
That's what I was told. I found that interesting. I was just kind of curious your thoughts after it. So they did address tight end with Schoonmaker. When you and I and a bunch of the reporters, we were asking the Cowboys about what it was going to take because Mike McCarthy had never taken a tight end in the first 2 rounds, which was a fun fact from John Machota. Why do you think they went with Schoonmaker? Is this a guy that, as Machota was, or as McCarthy was telling us, they wanted a guy that can play the traditional Y. They wanted a guy that can help at the line of scrimmage. They wanted a guy that they could add to special teams. Do you think that Schoonmaker's a guy that can address all of those needs that they were ultimately highlighting as what they needed in a tight end?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at what they have on their roster, and I thought it was interesting, fans are like, they already got Peyton Hendershot.
Yeah.
A year ago, no one knew who Peyton Hendershot was, and he had 11 catches. This guy's not – let's hold off and let's put the anointing oils away, as Parcells like to say. And Ferguson, I think, is a guy who's ready to become a really good, effective tight end for this team. And probably should have played more last year, in my opinion. And I think in Schoonmaker, they have a guy that is in that same mold of Ferguson and maybe Hendershot a little bit, all Big Ten guys. But I think he can line up at the Y and be in the line and help you with defensive ends and help your tackles. That's a big thing for them. And they can put him out in the slot. I thought it was interesting that ESPN Stats and Info, among the FBS tight ends, Schoonmaker's had the second most yards on crossing routes than any other tight end next to Brandon Bowers from Georgia. If you're compared to Brandon Bowers in any kind of way, because he would have been the top, and he'll be the top tight end next year if he comes out, that's a positive. I think they got a guy who's on the come in his time in Michigan, a guy that's played in an offense where the tight ends have to block. They have to do multiple things. You look at Harbaugh's history wherever he's been, the tight end has been a big part of their offense and can do a lot of different things. I kind of like the pick probably more than a lot of people. I think Bobby was on board with this one, right? You were a Schoonmaker guy.
Yeah. No, I love Schoonmaker. I think that's a guy who, like McCarthy said on Friday night, like while everybody views him as, oh, he's a run blocker and he can do this, I think there's a real ability and a real potential here to be like a vertical seam threat that they can develop. It's just he wasn't asked to do a lot of it at Michigan, just like Mozzie Smith wasn't asked to do a lot of pass rush stuff, but they think they can tap into that. We're talking here with Todd Archer from ESPN. Todd, are you surprised we got through the entire weekend 8 picks and there was not a single quarterback that they took?
No, not really. I think they almost took Aiden O'Connell there in the 4th round. I think he was up for discussion at 129 before they took Fehoko. And then once you get past that round, look, they like the 3 guys that they have. Obviously, they just re-signed Cooper Rush. They have Will Grier behind Dak. You know, we can always say, oh, do it like Green Bay did and draft a quarterback every year, blah, blah, blah. But what were the odds of that guy making the team or being able to do enough to show you something in training camp to put him on the practice squad even? So I'm okay that that's probably the Broadus is rolling over right now, punching his pillow about me saying something like that. It didn't bother me that much. They didn't take a quarterback once the O'Connell kid, who I know they were high on, slid past them. What I think is interesting, and maybe you guys have a list better than I do, I don't think they've taken a quarterback yet in undrafted free agency. So these guys might be holding a rookie minicamp without a quarterback, which would be interesting.
Are you more concerned about depth on offensive line or the lack of a kicker after this draft?
Yeah, I went with they asked us today, like, what's the biggest hole remaining? And I said kicker because they don't. Well, they have Tristan Vizcaino, but we saw him. Right. I guess I'm in the minority. I know Mike Solari was on with Bobby and the guys during the draft show saying that Tyler Smith is a tackle. Well, if you're playing your best 5 right now, if you had to put a best 5 together, knowing what we know, isn't Tyler Smith the left guard?
Yeah.
So
Tyron Smith is your left tackle.
Terrence Steele's your right tackle. If know what we know and what we think about health-wise, and we know Tyron's going to get hurt at some point and miss 5 or 6 games, and Steele's coming back from the knee. We get all that. But if you're building your best 5 now, Tyler Smith's at least an option to play left guard, and they like the Adoga kid maybe better than anybody thinks they do. And, you know, I guess it's not done where you can go out and find somebody in free agency. It seems to be pretty well picked over. But how would you feel today, though, if they took Matthew Bergeron at 26 over Mozzie Smith? Because that was probably the other guy they're going to take.
I don't go. I guess here's my thoughts on that, Todd. They seem to at least get by with what they were doing on the offensive line. And I don't know how I feel about this, but their confidence in Farniok and Josh Ball moving forward, But I feel like the kicker is an area you absolutely have to address. And that was the thing that we knew was a problem heading into training camp. We knew it was a problem heading into the playoffs and didn't get addressed. And so...
But they found Maher off the scrap heap, right? And it worked until the end.
Until it didn't. Would you give Maher another chance?
Todd.
That's a great one.
You could answer that, Todd.
I mean, if you think about it, he gave you your points at the beginning of the season when the offense didn't.
Look, and it wasn't he only struggled on the PATs. He made 11 straight field goal attempts at the end of the year. But I just think that that's a bridge too far probably for the Cowboys and things that Jerry has said to go back and do. Look, I think Maher might have a better chance of returning than Zeke, but I would probably look at a guy like Robbie Gould and say there's a better option for you. Now, you run into options about kickoffs, and can Gould do that because Anger can't kick off? So that opens up, there's some other guys out there you can go get. But, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't close the door on Maher, but it certainly seems like some of the stuff Jerry said from the playoff game to even Friday night, that about Yips, that doesn't seem to be the way that they would go.
My last thing was about Zeke. Is this actually kind of a live, Todd, or is Jerry just being nice?
I think it's Jerry being nice. And if you really parse what he said, he's like, nothing that's happened this weekend has changed my mind. Well, he's not really told us what his mind was, so his mind could be, we're not bringing the guy back.
Yeah.
So nothing has changed his mind. Look, Zeke should have a job in the NFL, can still be an effective player. I just don't think he'll be in Dallas. I go back to in 2004, the Cowboys signed Eddie George to, it might have been $2 million. I don't know, remember the number. But that was the same number Tennessee was going to offer him. He's like, I'll take $2 million from Dallas. I'm not going to take $2 million from Tennessee to stay. And I think Zeke would have such a oversized position in the locker room to what his role would actually be that it just wouldn't make the best sense. And talking to people, they kind of like what Ronald Jones can do. The guy they picked up in free agency. They like Malik Davis. They just added Deuce. So they have some options that behind Tony Pollard that should be workable. But if Mike is saying they want to run the ball more, I can see why Jerry's not ultimately closing the door, but I think it's a little bit of Jerry being Jerry, and I don't – they gave his number away, right?
That was tough.
Todd, how much should Cowboy fans be freaking out over Howie Roseman and the Eagles?
It's fine.
Oh, you sound like Bobby.
There we go, Todd.
What did Nakobe Dean do last year? What did Jordan Davis do last year? Nolan Smith's a guy that guys I talk to in the league, not just in Dallas, say you can run at him. He's a one-dimensional guy. They're really good. Don't get me wrong, but I think people tend to forget that the Cowboys still won 12 games last year. This isn't a rebuild that the Cowboys have to go through to beat the Eagles. I think it's clearly those two guys in the division and maybe those two guys with San Francisco in the conference. But, tell me I'll go back to it. The last time there's been a repeat champion in the NFC East was 2003-04. I would put money right now down on somebody else other than the Eagles winning the division because in the last 20 years, that's what's happened.
And it feels like it would be Cowboys over Giants at this point.
What do you mean over Giants?
If it's someone outside of the Eagles.
Oh, yeah. Brian Broaddus is very bitter that we stole you from his afternoon show today. We'll give Choppy way more vacation if it means getting you back on. Thank you so much, man. Keep killing it. We appreciate you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Todd.